When building a PC setup, the one thing that is always overlooked is the monitor that you buy. If you have a bad monitor, it won't matter what parts you have in your desktop. It will still look like you're playing Pong on your grandmother's old desktop. But we aren't saying you should go out and buy the Samsung G9 Neo for a whopping $2,000 either. They're monitors for everything, such as gaming, video editing, animation, Photoshop, or general office or home use. When looking at monitors, there's so much information that you need to go through. You need to look at aspect ratios, response time, screen size, hertz, resolution, what types of ports it has, how many ports it has, and plenty more. The whole thing can be extremely overwhelming if you don't know what all these terms mean. What's also overwhelming is knowing that only 2% of people that watch our videos are subscribed. Now with all that being said, let's break down exactly what you need to know when you're looking to buy a new monitor. If there are a few different things that you do on your computer, you want to pick the most graphically intensive one and buy a monitor that supports that. For example, if I want to be able to do homework and game on my computer, I'm not going to buy a monitor so I can just do my homework. I'm going to buy a monitor that will support my gaming addiction. From there, we need to have a price range in mind. Monitors can get very expensive very quickly, but a price range topping off at around $300 is more than enough to get a solid monitor that will support everything that you want to do. There are benefits to spending more, but we'll go over that later. Now we're going to look through the specs themselves. The first and most basic thing that you need to choose is going to be the size of your screen. You need to look at where the monitor is sitting to see what size would even fit. After that, it's all personal preference. If you want a bigger screen, you should go for it. But keep in mind, if two monitors have the same exact specs and the only difference is the size, the bigger one will always cost you just a little bit more. Along with the size of the monitor, you also need to pay attention to the resolution. First, we'll start off with the 16:9 aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is determined by the number of pixels there is horizontally compared to the amount there is vertically. So, in a 16:9 aspect ratio, if there's 16 pixels going across the screen, there must be 9 going up. This would then scale up to 32 pixels by 18 pixels, then 64 by 36, and so on, up to something like 1920 by 1080, which is a traditional Full HD display. There are other aspect ratios though. For example, an ultra-wide display doesn't use the traditional 16:9 rule. They can range anywhere from 17:9 to something like the Samsung Neo, which uses a 32:9 aspect ratio. Notice the 9 always stays the same, so an ultra-wide resolution like 2560 by 1080p, you can find out the resolution by the height. So although it might be wider than a traditional 1920 by 1080 display, it will still have the same clarity. No matter what aspect ratio you're talking about, these numbers show how many pixels there are on the entire screen. For example, 1920 by 1080 has over 2 million pixels and a 4K display has over 8 million. On a 1080p display, no matter how big the screen is, it will only have 2 million pixels to spread across the entire display. If these pixels get dragged out over a larger surface area, it requires the pixels to be much bigger. For example, a 1920 by 1080p billboard can look very pixelated due to its larger size, whereas a 24-inch 1920 by 1080p monitor can look crystal clear. This is because of pixel density. The amount of hertz your monitor has is one of the most important specs when it comes to gaming. Hertz, also known as refresh rate, is the speed the monitor is able to change images. This means the more hertz you have, the more images can flash on your screen in a single second. The higher the hertz, the smoother the picture. So 1 hertz equals 1 FPS, or frames per second. This is extremely important for gamers. For example, if you have a game that's running at 120 FPS and the monitor you have only supports 60 hertz, the monitor will only show 60 frames per second. Response time is another important attribute for any monitor. Response time is the amount of time it takes for a monitor to shift from one color to another. The amount of time this takes is calculated by milliseconds, and the amount of milliseconds it takes is considered the response time. Response time can range anywhere from around 10 milliseconds to less than 1 millisecond. This determines the smoothness of the color of your monitor. This all means that the lower the response time you have, the better it is for gaming. Now that we've gone over all the specs that are in a display, we need to go over all the ports that can be found on these monitors and what each of them are useful for. Older ports such as VGA and DVI can still be seen on newer monitors, but we would recommend if you see these ports, you should stick to the main two, HDMI and DisplayPort. USB-C gets a little tricky. USB-C display support varies greatly depending on its version, so without wasting 5 minutes of your valuable time, here's a graph that shows its capabilities. The most universally used is HDMI. HDMI has been around since the beginning of the HD world. The port itself is kind of out of date in some regards, but such as its sturdiness and hertz support, it falls behind to DisplayPort, but it's still very universally used and pretty much the standard across any display. DisplayPort is the other modern connector on these monitors. It's just the better version of HDMI. With a locking mechanism, it's sturdier and in general, always one step ahead of HDMI performance-wise. Versions of these ports are very different. Depending on each of these ports versions, they will support different resolutions and different hertz. DisplayPort usually has a higher hertz output on the same monitor compared to HDMI. For example, on the Gigabyte MRQ27, the HDMI only supports 1440p at 144 Hz, but the DisplayPort can support 1440p at 170 Hz. This is also due to overclocking, but that also gets really tricky. And here's a chart to explain the differences of each. Color accuracy is another important thing to keep in mind when you're buying a monitor. Color accuracy is defined by how well the monitor can produce colors and shades as intended. The color accuracy can differ from monitor to monitor very drastically. The better the color accuracy also leads to the much higher price. For gamers, this is not a huge deal. Games will look slightly different on some monitors, but at the end of the day, it'll still be the same game. Whereas if you do something like graphic design or video editing, the color accuracy on a monitor is probably the most important thing you're looking for. HDR is commonly talked about in newer monitors. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. In its simplest form, it allows a monitor to go to higher extremes when it comes to color and brightness. More data is transferred, which allows for the monitor to look more real and dynamic, hence the name, High Dynamic Range. This feature is very nice to have, but as all the other features too, it increases the price. Now it's time to dive into the abyss that is G-Sync, V-Sync, and FreeSync. G-Sync is NVIDIA's custom hardware-based monitor syncing technology and is used to prevent screen tearing and stuttering. FreeSync is AMD's custom hardware-based monitor syncing technology, which is equivalent to NVIDIA's G-Sync. The way it achieves this is by syncing the refresh rate of the monitor with the FPS that you're getting from your graphics card. Rather than using hardware, V-Sync is software-based. It's a solution for the same exact problem. V-Sync forces your GPU to hold the upcoming frames in a buffer and holds them until your monitor is ready for them. With now understanding all of this information, you're going to be able to pick out a monitor that will best suit your needs. We also have a few recommendations for you that will hopefully narrow down the options that you have to pick from. First, we'll go over the cheapest monitors out of the bunch. My favorite entry-level monitor is a Pixio PX273, which is a 27-inch 1080p display with 165Hz and a 1 millisecond response time, and it also supports AMD FreeSync. And it comes in at only $160. The MSI Optic G273QF and the Acer Nitro ED270 are in the $300 price point range. The MSI Optic's G273QF is a 27-inch 1440p monitor with a 165Hz refresh rate and a 1 millisecond response time, and it supports NVIDIA G-Sync. The Acer Nitro ED270 is a 27-inch 1080p curved monitor with a 240Hz refresh rate and a 1 millisecond response time, and it features AMD FreeSync. Both of these monitors fit different needs at the same price. If you want more Hertz for FPS titles, the Acer is the better option, but if you want the detail and quality, you might want to go for the MSI. There are also more specialized monitors out there as well. The Gigabyte M27Q is a 27-inch 1440p display with a 170Hz refresh rate and a 0.5 millisecond response time. It also has HDR and AMD's FreeSync. This is my own personal display, and if I could marry it, I would. This is a great monitor when you're looking for color accuracy. The combination of 1440p along with the HDR makes it a great monitor for things like animation, video editing, and graphic design. At a $330 price point, it's a great monitor, and it should definitely be on your list for potential monitors to buy. The final two monitors that we're going to be going over is the nicest out of the bunch. They have everything you could ever want, and when you see the price, you'll know why. The Asus ROG Swift is a 24.5-inch 1080p display with 360Hz with a 1 millisecond response time. Also has HDR and NVIDIA's G-Sync. A 360Hz monitor is not common by any means. It is also shown by the hefty price tag of $550. If you're very into gaming and you have a computer that can utilize all of the 360Hz, you should think about getting this. But for most of us, it's definitely overkill. The Acer Predator XB283K is a 28-inch 4K monitor with a 144Hz refresh rate and a 1 millisecond response time. It also has AMD's FreeSync and NVIDIA's G-Sync. It comes with one USB Type-C port, one Display 1.4 port, two HDMI 2.1 ports, and 4 USB ports. This is definitely the best I/O out of any of these monitors. You can get this monitor for $630. The 4K aspect alone for this monitor is what makes it that expensive, and the fact that it has great diversity when it comes to ports is also very important to potential buyers. All these monitors we listed are just suggestions. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Hopefully we've taught you a few things to look for when buying a monitor and will help you find the one you want or just need.
This video took an extremely long time to make, so if you enjoyed, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to comment any other good monitor deals that you were able to find.